General Hospital teaser Sidwell's arrival in Port Charles was anything but coincidence. It was the calculated move of a man with a long game, a strategy stitched together with shadows and silence, hidden behind polite smiles and innocuous gestures. To the untrained eye, his purchase of the Cassadine estate might have seemed like a vanity project or a real estate transaction spurred by prestige and history. But to those who dared to look deeper, it was unmistakably clear that this was about far more than land or legacy. Sidwell was not after the Cassadine name, he was after what the name represented, power carved in blood and sealed by fear. And at the center of that dark legacy lay one object, Helena's dagger, a blade soaked in memory, history, and malice. The dagger, long believed to have been lost to the depths of the harbor after Alexis cast it away in an act of painful liberation, reappeared not by chance but by intent. Sidwell did not return it as a gesture of goodwill or reconciliation. It was a calculated trigger, a surgical strike on Alexis's most fragile memories, forcing her to confront the moment her mother died before her eyes, the weight of that trauma carried in every inch of steel. This was not a gift, it was a message, and it spoke volumes. In returning the dagger to Alexis, Sidwell wasn't just testing her. He was awakening something in her, beckoning the dormant parts of her psyche, the darkness, the self-doubt. The Cassadine blood that Helena once claimed could never be escaped. Emotionally frayed and painfully isolated, Alexis became the perfect mark. The manipulations of Rick and Ava were mere distractions, petty games compared to the deeper psychological warfare Sidwell had embarked upon. By pushing Rick and Ava to tighten their grip, threatening Alexis with Christina's institutionalization, exposing legal drafts, painting her as the villain, Sidwell ensured that Alexis would be cornered. The people she once trusted began to drift away, mistrust corroding every bond. Her daughters, skeptical and wounded, began keeping their distance. Friends turned their backs. And while Alexis struggled to hold her ground, Sidwell's plan tightened around her like a noose. Every action Sidwell took was designed to resurrect the ghosts Alexis had buried. With every glance at the dagger, Alexis saw Helena. She heard her voice. She relived the terror. And while she attempted to rationalize, to compartmentalize, she was being emotionally dismantled piece by piece. Sidwell knew this, he had studied her past, charted her traumas, understood exactly how to apply just enough pressure to make her unravel without even realizing it. And when the past becomes present, when nightmares return as reality, even the strongest mind begins to crack. Alexis, the ever-pragmatic attorney, the reformed alcoholic, the mother fighting to hold her family together, now found herself slipping, unsure of who to trust, unsure of her own judgment, unsure of the truth. What made Sidwell's tactic so effective was its subtlety. There were no loud accusations, no direct threats. Instead, he moved like a shadow across Alexis's world, shifting pieces, nudging allies into adversaries, and manipulating emotions with the precision of a surgeon. His apparent ignorance of the Cassadine family history was a performance, one executed with enough clumsiness to be believable, yet just vague enough to stoke suspicion. The dagger was not just a historical relic to him, it was a tool, a symbol, and potentially a key. A key to something hidden beneath the surface of Windmere, or within Alexis herself. There were whispers, too. Quiet rumors that Sidwell was not an outsider at all, but perhaps a long-lost offshoot of the Cassadine line, a bastard child erased from records but not from ambition. His obsession with the estate, with Helena's possessions, with Alexis herself, none of it aligned with the image of a disinterested entrepreneur. He was assembling something. And Alexis, whether she wanted to be or not, was at the heart of it. In Rick and Ava, Sidwell found convenient pawns. Their greed, their grudges, their short-sighted goals made them easy to manipulate. They believed they were using Alexis as leverage to get what they wanted, but in truth, they were being used themselves, pushed into confrontation to heighten Alexis's sense of isolation and betrayal. The more pressure they applied, the more Alexis was driven back toward the one thing she feared most, her own bloodline, her own reflection in Helena's mirror. Sidwell's real plan may be even more insidious. Perhaps he does not seek to destroy Alexis, but to reshape her, to mold her into something else, something closer to what Helena once saw her as. A weapon, an heir, a woman of Cassadine fire and steel. The dagger is both a trigger and a test. If Alexis succumbs to its pull, if she finds herself using it, even in self-defense, it could mark the turning point that Sidwell needs. A symbolic act of violence would sever the last remnants of who she used to be and forge a new identity in its place, one loyal not to justice or family, but to legacy, blood, and vengeance. And Alexis knows it. Deep inside, beneath the confusion and the guilt, she senses the trap. She sees the edges of the web, the faint glimmers of a larger scheme playing out behind the scenes. But she is alone, and Sidwell thrives in isolation. He watches her through Marco, his son, planted like a seed in the legal soil of her career. Every client meeting, every moment of weakness. Every shift in behavior is noted, reported, and analyzed. Alexis has become the unwitting subject of a psychological experiment with no clear outcome, except that Sidwell holds the controls. If Alexis is to survive this, truly survive, it won't be enough to resist the dagger. She must destroy it. Not symbolically, not ceremonially, but completely, melt it down, crush it. Erase its existence. Only by severing the physical link to Helena's cruelty can she hope to sever the psychological one. But time is not on her side. With Christina unpredictable, Rick and Ava scheming, and Sidwell tightening his grip, Alexis must decide whether to fight or fall. One wrong move, one act of misplaced trust, and the dagger may draw blood again, perhaps hers. Or perhaps someone she loves. And still, Sidwell waits. Patient. Watching. Knowing the past always finds a way to return. Marco was never meant to be just another fresh-faced associate at the law firm. His resume may have checked all the boxes, his demeanor exuded the right blend of eagerness and humility. But beneath the surface lay a mission carefully engineered by the man who had raised him in shadows, Sidwell. As Sidwell's secret son, Marco was planted not simply to earn a paycheck or to begin a legal career, but to serve as an instrument of surveillance, manipulation, and infiltration. From the moment he walked into the firm, every moment Alexis spent in that office became data, every keystroke, every phone call, every whispered conversation behind a closed door was being monitored, catalogued, and reported back to Sidwell. Alexis, thinking she had only one battle to fight, had unknowingly stepped onto a chessboard where her every move was not only anticipated but choreographed by forces she could neither see nor fully understand. Sidwell's decision to delay the delivery of Helena's dagger to the firm wasn't a show of consideration for Alexis's psychological state, it was a tactical pause. He was waiting for the precise moment when Alexis would be most vulnerable, most off balance, most unmoored from the network of relationships that once grounded her. He wanted the impact to be seismic, not subtle. The dagger wasn't just a reminder of violence, it was a memory in solid form. A token of terror that reactivated every buried trauma the moment Alexis saw it. To reintroduce it prematurely would have risked dulling its emotional impact. Sidwell, ever the master strategist, waited until he was sure it would hit her like a hammer, not a whisper. In this psychological war, Sidwell was not building a case, he was constructing a labyrinth. One so carefully designed that Alexis, despite her legal brilliance and emotional resilience, would have no clear path out. Every twist, every turn, every interaction with Rick, Ava, Marco, or even her daughters, had been subtly distorted to steer her deeper into confusion. Sidwell understood that true control did not come from force, but from fragmentation, fragmenting a person's trust in others, their belief in their own instincts, and their sense of identity. Alexis, trapped within the walls of a life she no longer recognized, could not even be sure which thoughts were her own anymore. The dagger itself, Helena's infamous blade, was never just a relic of the past. It was a cursed artifact. A symbolic embodiment of the Cassadine legacy, a legacy built on death, deception, and the unchecked wielding of power. Its return into Alexis's life wasn't about confronting history. It was about rewriting it, distorting it, weaponizing it. Touching the dagger, bringing it home, placing it where it could be seen every day, these were not acts of happenstance. They were symptoms of the psychological spell Sidwell had cast. Unwittingly, Alexis had begun to surrender to the darker parts of her heritage, not out of acceptance, but because Sidwell had manipulated her environment so thoroughly that embracing the dagger felt like a form of control, even if it wasn't. The ghosts of Helena and Julian hovered over her like ever-present specters. The dagger was not merely a physical object, it was a beacon that summoned their memories, their voices, their chaos. Sidwell knew that emotional regression was a powerful tool. If he could pull Alexis back into the emotional turmoil of her most vulnerable years, he could control her future. And in a chilling twist, it was working. The more Alexis tried to resist, the more entangled she became. The more she fought to stay grounded, the more uncertain her footing felt. Meanwhile, Rick and Ava believed they held leverage over Alexis through Christina's hospital documents and legal threats. But what they failed to grasp was that Alexis now possessed a weapon with consequences far beyond their comprehension. The dagger had the potential to alter more than physical safety, it had the power to shift the psychological battlefield entirely. In a moment of despair, rage, or fear, Alexis might use it. And if she did, there would be no undoing what followed. A single act of violence, no matter how justified, could irreversibly taint her, and Sidwell was counting on that. If he could turn Alexis from victim to perpetrator, from mother to threat, then he would have the ultimate trump card, not only to discredit her but to claim her place in the Cassadine hierarchy with impunity. It is entirely plausible, if not probable, that Sidwell is himself a Cassadine, a bastard son or distant relative whose name was erased from the family records during one of the many internal purges for power. His calculated reappearance in Port Charles just as Alexis was reluctantly stepping into the role of estate trustee couldn't be coincidence. It was alignment by design. He is, perhaps, staking a claim not only to property and prestige but to blood, Cassadine blood. If he can prove that the current generation of Cassadines is unfit to carry the torch, then he could position himself as the true heir either by lineage or through leverage. Holding the dagger is only step one in a longer con. The next steps are more insidious. Coercing Alexis into signing over power of attorney, transferring estate control, or even legitimizing him as a rightful heir by proxy. Alexis, emotionally compromised and isolated, might one day see handing over control as a relief rather than a loss. Sidwell doesn't need to win by force, he only needs her to surrender, voluntarily. Broken by the weight of her past and the pressure of her present. Marco plays a vital role in this as the eyes and ears of Sidwell. Alexis may feel a strange kinship with him, mistaking his attentiveness for loyalty or empathy. In truth, every piece of advice Marco gives, every shoulder he offers to cry on, is calibrated to reinforce Sidwell's plan. He's not just monitoring Alexis, he's shaping her, encouraging her doubts, amplifying her fears, nudging her gently but persistently toward the edge. If Sidwell succeeds, the transformation of Alexis will be total. She will no longer be a defender of justice, but a symbol of downfall, a Cassadine not because of her name, but because of the choices forced upon her. And in the end, when Port Charles looks back, they won't see the woman who once stood for reason and redemption. They'll see the woman who picked up Helena's dagger and never put it down. Unless, of course, Alexis can still break free. Unless she finds a way to dismantle the labyrinth from within, expose Marco, and confront Sidwell head-on, not with fear, but with clarity. But time is running short, and every hour the dagger remains in her possession is another hour Sidwell wins. The true question now is not whether Alexis will fight, but whether she will realize the war has already begun. Meanwhile, Christina, impulsive, emotionally driven, and deeply wounded, stands precariously close to becoming an unwitting instrument in Sidwell's long game. Her anger toward Alexis has only intensified in the wake of recent betrayals. Or at least what she perceives as betrayals. The revelation that Alexis had considered involuntarily committing her to a psychiatric facility has fractured what little trust remained between them. Christina, already struggling with her identity and her place within a family built on dysfunction and trauma, now views her mother not as a source of guidance but as an enemy in disguise. It is in this fragile state of emotional volatility that she becomes most vulnerable to external manipulation, and most dangerous if given access to something as symbolic and lethal as Helena's dagger. To anyone unfamiliar with its history, the dagger might appear as just another ornate relic. But to those who lived through the horrors of Helena's reign, the weapon is much more than sharpened steel. It is a legacy of death, a talisman of manipulation, and a totem of twisted Cassadine pride. The blade once severed the life of Alexis's mother before her very eyes. Now it lurks once again in the shadows of their lives, threatening to repeat history not through Helena's hand, but through the misdirected rage of her granddaughter. Christina, in a moment of blind fury or confusion, could become the vessel for the dagger's next act of destruction. And if that happens, it will not be the Cassadine curse that takes hold, it will be the failure of Alexis to stop the chain before it devours another generation. The weight of this possibility crushes Alexis, adding another layer to the suffocating burden she already bears. Her own guilt, combined with the psychological warfare inflicted by Sidwell and his network of pawns, leaves her spiraling. She questions herself constantly, her decisions, her instincts, even her very sanity. Where once she was grounded in logic and reason, now she finds herself adrift in a sea of second guesses and half-formed fears. Every smile hides a threat. Every kind word masks manipulation. The walls are closing in, and Alexis cannot tell whether she is being hunted or merely haunted. The most terrifying aspect of her situation is that the danger doesn't come from a single source. It comes from everywhere: Rick and Ava with their blackmail, Marco with his quiet surveillance, Sidwell with his unseen but ever-tightening grip, and now, potentially, Christina herself, whose pain and disillusionment could be turned into a weapon at any moment. The tragedy is not just in what may happen, but in how preventable it once seemed. Had Alexis acted earlier, destroyed the dagger when it first returned, or severed ties with Sidwell before he found a foothold, this nightmare might never have grown to its current scale. But regret is a currency that holds no value in war, and Alexis is already too deep in the trenches. There is only one path forward, and it is steep, treacherous, and unforgiving. Alexis must do more than rid herself of the dagger. She must annihilate every trace of the Cassadine chains that still cling to her soul. She must burn the history, break the bloodlines, reject the narrative that has been forced upon her since the day she was born. That includes letting go of the fear that she is destined to become Helena, to harm as Helena harmed, to spiral into the same madness that devoured generations before her. But to do this, she must summon a strength that has long been dormant. The strength not just to survive, but to reclaim control over her story, and rewrite it on her own terms. Doing so will require confrontation, not just with Sidwell, but with herself. She must stare down her past without flinching, recognize the darkness within her without succumbing to it, and find a way to stand firm even when those around her falter. The dagger must not only be destroyed, it must be denounced, reduced to nothing more than scrap, its power nullified both physically and symbolically. Alexis cannot simply throw it into a river again and hope it disappears. That kind of naivete is what allowed it to return in the first place. This time, there must be no half measures. No acts of hopefulness or hesitation. It must be scorched out of existence, along with the fear it represents. But every day that passes without action, Sidwell gains ground. His psychological hold over Alexis grows tighter, his manipulation of those around her becomes more intricate, more intimate. The illusion he has woven is nearly complete, and within it, Alexis is painted not as a victim, but as a threat, a woman unhinged, dangerous, incapable of making rational decisions. If he succeeds in turning that illusion into perceived reality, he may very well discredit her completely, pushing her out of her legal and familial roles and replacing her with someone more stable, more fit, someone like himself. The clock is ticking. And as it ticks, the lives of those around Alexis, Sam, Molly, Christina, hang in the balance. Any one of them could be drawn into Sidwell's endgame, pulled into the vortex of legacy and lies. The dagger may be forged of metal, but the true weapon is chaos, and Sidwell wields it with unnerving precision. The longer Alexis waits to act, the more power she cedes. Soon, even those who once supported her might be too far gone, seduced by false narratives or corrupted by fear. In the end, the most dangerous question isn't whether Alexis can destroy the dagger. It's whether she still believes she has the right to. That self-doubt, planted by Sidwell and watered by years of trauma, is the final chain that binds her. Until she breaks it, until she looks in the mirror and sees not Helena's descendant, but Alexis herself, she will remain a prisoner of her bloodline. And if she fails to make that leap, then the curse of the Cassidines won't end with her. It will live on, in Christina, in Marco, in Sidwell's legacy, and the blade will draw blood again. Not because it was destined to, but because no one was brave enough to shatter it completely.